The scream that morning didn't sound human. It tore through the neighborhood like a siren, high-pitched and desperate. Then came another deeper, louder, followed by frantic splashing. I slid open the patio door and my stomach tightened. The air smelled like chlorine, smoke, and karma. My pool, my quiet blue sanctuary, had become a battlefield. Karen Moore, our beloved HOA president and part-time dictator, was in the middle of it, thrashing like she'd been dropped in acid. Her perfect bob stuck to her face. Her designer sunglasses floated beside her like little black rafts of denial. Her husband, Greg, was clawing at his arms, shouting something about his skin burning. A half-dozen guests stumbled out of the water, red, furious, and confused. It looked like chaos. To me, it looked like justice was finally clocking in for work. Karen spotted me standing on the porch, calm, barefoot, mug of coffee in hand. Her voice cracked when she screamed, "You poisoned us!" I tilted my head, took a sip, and smiled. Poison? No, Karen. That would be unethical. I just treated my pool. If you've ever had to smile through someone else's meltdown, go ahead and like this moment, because I was done pretending. Neighbors peeked over fences. Someone filmed. Sirens echoed from down the street. Karen's rage burned hotter than the morning sun. "You'll pay for this, Ethan," she shouted, pointing at me like a CEO firing an intern. I set the mug down slowly. "Karen," I said, voice even and soft, "you've been using my peace as your playground for months. I finally put up a sign. If that line hits just right, comment boundaries, because some lessons only sink in when they sting." The first police cruiser rolled in, lights washing the water in red and blue. People yelled, scratched, tripped. Karen was still shouting, but her voice sounded smaller now, swallowed by chaos. I didn't move. Didn't raise my voice. I just whispered to myself. Funny thing about control, once you lose it, it doesn't come back. But if you think this started with a prank, you're missing the real story. It began with silence, and how far one woman pushed it before it finally broke. Have you ever noticed how trouble never announces itself? It just creeps in like noise under a closed door. For months, I'd been ignoring that noise. At first, it was small things. A towel was left on my fence. A couple of flip-flops by the pool steps. Music was echoing faintly while I was still at work. Then one Friday evening, I pulled into my driveway and froze. There were voices laughing, splashing coming from my backyard. I stepped through the gate, and that's when I saw it. 4 people in my pool. A few lawn chairs were dragged across the deck. Karen Moore was sitting in my chair wearing my sunglasses like she owned the place. "Evening, neighbor," she said, fake cheerful like she was hosting a charity event. My jaw locked. "Karen, what the hell are you doing here?" She laughed softly. "Oh, relax, Ethan. The kids wanted to swim. It's just water. We're all neighbors. Here." If you've ever met someone who hides arrogance behind the word neighbor, go ahead and comment "seen it" below, because that line still burns. I kept my voice steady. "This is private property." She gave me that fake sympathetic smile, the corporate kind that says "I hear you, but I don't care." "Actually, the HOA considers your pool a community visual space," she said. "Technically, it enhances the neighborhood." "You're welcome." I didn't even know how to respond, so I didn't. I just walked back inside, locked the door, and stared out through the blinds while she laughed in my backyard. If you've ever had to bite your tongue just to keep the peace, hit like, because that night, I almost lost it. Later, as their laughter faded, I realized something. Peace isn't free. Some people think kindness is weakness until it costs them something. That was the night my silence cracked. I didn't know it yet, but the same pool they were mocking me in would soon teach them what boundaries really feel like. Because the next time Karen stepped into that water, it wasn't for relaxation, it was for revelation. 3 days later, I got a letter, folded neatly, HOA letterhead. No greeting, just an accusation. "Your property violates Section 4B, visual inconsistency. Please repaint your fence within 7 days." I stared at it for a full minute, not angry, not shocked, just quiet. Because my fence was brand new. And the signature at the bottom? Karen Moore, HOA president. If you've ever received a petty, power-drunk message from someone who can't stand not being in control, comment "Classic Karen" right now. I didn't yell, didn't call. I just pinned the letter to my fridge like a trophy, then I grabbed a notebook. Not to vent, to document date, time, violation, screenshots, photos, notes. Every moment, every intrusion, every sarcastic smile, I started logging it all. Because if corporate life taught me anything, it's this: paper trails win wars. A few days later, I saw her again walking that same perfect stride down the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, fake smile plastered on. She waved. "Oh, Ethan! Did you get my note?" "Sure did," I said, matching her smile. "Working on it." Her eyes narrowed just a little. She wasn't used to being calm. "Go ahead. Like this part, if you've ever had to smile in front of someone you secretly outsmarted." That night, I opened my security app, installed new cameras, motion alerts, rewired the gate lock. And then I sat on my porch, same spot where she'd trespassed, and waited. The neighborhood was quiet, still. The pool reflected the porch light, calm as glass. But I wasn't calm anymore. Something inside me had shifted like a switch, flipping from tolerance to strategy. I wasn't planning revenge, I was planning an order. If you've ever reached the point where being nice stops working, share this story with someone who understands. Because from that moment on, it wasn't about rules anymore. It was about balance, and balance was about to tilt hard in my favor. Saturday afternoon, sunlight spilled across the deck. I just sat down with a cold drink when the sound hit laughter. Loud, obnoxious, entitled laughter. It was coming from my backyard. Again. I froze, jaw tight. My gate was locked. Or so I thought. I stepped outside and felt that gut-deep chill you get when something sacred's been crossed. My pool shimmered under the light, and in it, 5 people. Floating. Laughing. Splashing. Karen was there, of course, sunglasses on, drink in hand, like it was her private resort. Someone was grilling on my patio. Smoke curled up from my barbecue. A cooler sat open beside my chair full of drinks I didn't buy. If you've ever come home to someone treating your property like a theme park, comment "unbelievable" right now. I didn't yell. Didn't even move at first. Just stood there, watching. Karen noticed me and waved lazily. "Oh, Ethan, didn't know you'd be home this early. You really should lock your gate better." My voice came out flat. "It was locked," she laughed. "Well, maybe it's a sign you should share more." We're all neighbors, community matters, right? That line hit like nails on glass. Community? From the same woman who sent me a violation letter for a single leaf in my gutter? I took a slow breath. "Karen, get out of my pool now!" Her husband scoffed. "Come on, man. Don't be that guy." I smiled, small, quiet, sharp. "Too late." I turned, went inside, and shut the door. Didn't slam it, didn't shout. Just closed it gently. If you've ever had that moment, the one where rage turns to focus, hit like, because that's where everything changed for me. Behind the glass, I watched her laugh, sip her drink, and keep swimming. And I whispered to myself, "You wanted a community, Karen? You're about to get one made of consequences." Because from that moment, I stopped being the nice neighbor and started becoming her worst-case scenario. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry that part was done. It was because my mind had switched modes, from emotion to execution. I sat at my desk with a legal pad, a cup of cold coffee, and a single question written across the top. How do you stop people who don't believe rules apply to them? And just under it, I wrote the answer. You make the rules apply harder. If you've ever had to fight back quietly, not with fists, but with planning, go ahead and like this part. You'll understand what comes next. I reviewed the HOA bylaws like I used to read contracts back at my corporate job. Every clause, every footnote, every vague word that could be twisted, I highlighted it all. Then I checked my cameras. Every motion alert, every trespass, timestamps, evidence, patterns. That's when it hit me. Karen didn't respect fences because nobody had ever made her earn one. So I got creative. The next morning, I installed a hidden camera behind the old lantern post. Motion sensor, night mode. Then another near the gate latch. Finally, one above the patio, invisible under the wooden beam. If you've ever turned pain into preparation, comment ready because this was my turning point. By the end of that weekend, I had hours of footage. Karen is sneaking through the gate. Her kids are tossing pool toys over the fence. Her husband was turning on my grill like it was his. I compiled it all into a single folder on my laptop titled Exhibit a Neighborhood Hospitality. And just for good measure, I started thinking about Plan B, something poetic. Something that wouldn't hurt anyone but would make sure they never forgot whose pool they were swimming in. If this kind of quiet revenge makes you grin a little, go ahead and share this story. Because the next move, it wasn't loud. It was legendary. Because the next time Karen's family touched that water, I wasn't just watching. I was ready. By Monday morning, the plan had a heartbeat. I wasn't thinking like a neighbor anymore. I was thinking like a strategist. Every detail had to fit. Timing, weather, even the weekend crowd. Karen's family always showed up on Saturdays around noon. Her husband would bring drinks. The kids would splash first. Karen would sit on the edge of the pool, legs crossed, sunglasses on, pretending the world spun around her. So I circled Saturday, 12 p.m. in red. That was my launch window. If you've ever planned something with quiet precision, not out of hate, but out of principle, go ahead and like this part. You know the satisfaction that comes with patience. I started digging around online. Not for anything cruel, just effective. I searched non-toxic pool prank safe for skin. Harmless powder reaction in water. And there it was, a product made for college pranks. A fine invisible powder that caused harmless skin irritation when mixed with chlorine. Totally legal. Totally temporary. But extremely uncomfortable. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about teaching a lesson that would stick. I ordered a bag. When it arrived, I held it up to the light. Looked like flour, soft and weightless. The label said, for external use only. I couldn't help but laugh. Perfect. That Friday night, I waited until the neighborhood was quiet. Then I walked out back, moonlight spilling across the deck, and sprinkled a fine line of powder across the pool's surface. It dissolved instantly silent, invisible, just floating there, waiting. If you've ever had that moment, when revenge turns from idea to action comment, it's time below. I stood there for a while, watching the water ripple under the porch light. It looked calm, still, pure. No one would ever know what was waiting under that perfect reflection. Then I whispered, let's see how community spirit feels now. Because by the time the sun rose over the neighborhood, that pool wasn't just water anymore, it was a wake-up call. Saturday came bright and calm, too calm. Sunlight shimmered off the water like nothing had ever happened. Birds chirped. The air smelled of cut grass and quiet payback. I was inside making coffee when I heard the gate latch click. Voices followed, laughing, confident, uninvited again. My heart didn't race this time. It slowed down. That's how you know you're past anger when calm feels heavier than rage. I peeked through the blinds. There they were. Karen, her husband, Greg, their kids, 2 friends. Karen tossed her towel over my chair like it was a throne. The water looks perfect today, she said. Yeah, it did. They all jumped in, 1, 2, 3 splashes, then silence. It started small. Karen scratched her shoulder. Greg rubbed his neck. One of the kids frowned, whispering something. Then the screams came, high-pitched, real, raw. Karen shot out of the water, gasping. What's happening to my skin? Her husband cursed, clawing at his arms. The kids scrambled out, dripping, crying. The scene turned chaotic, fast towels flying, water thrashing, chairs knocked over. I opened my sliding door and stepped out, sipping my coffee. The steam curled into the air like punctuation. Karen turned, red-faced and furious. You poisoned us, you maniac! I raised an eyebrow. Poison? No, Karen. That's called cleaning. You should try it sometime. If that comeback made you smirk, like this part because I'd waited months to say that. Sirens echoed from somewhere down the block. Someone must have called 911. Neighbors peeked over fences, whispering, filming. Karen pointed at me, trembling with rage. You'll regret this! I smiled slow and steady. No, Karen, I already regretted letting it get this far. If you've ever felt the satisfaction of watching karma show up on time, comment right on schedule below. The officers arrived minutes later, confusion written all over their faces. But me? I was calm. Because for the first time in months, my backyard finally felt like mine again. But this wasn't the end, not by a long shot. Because when you bruise someone's ego like Karen's, they don't heal quietly. By the time the siren stopped screaming, my yard looked like a crime scene. 2 police cruisers. Half the neighborhood is gawking. Karen was wrapped in a towel, still shouting like she was the victim of a chemical attack. Her husband is pacing. The kids are crying. I stood by the porch rail, quiet, mug in hand, same calm, same coffee. One of the officers approached me. "Sir, what exactly happened here?" Before I could answer, Karen cut in. "He poisoned our family. He put something in the water. We could have died!" The officer turned to me. "Is that true?" I shook my head. "No, sir. That pool is private property. I maintain it weekly." "They weren't invited," Karen snapped. "It's a community space." "The HOA rules say," I interrupted, soft but sharp. "Actually," I reached into my folder and handed him a sheet. "Property deed. Lot lines. HOA Clause 3C specifically says community spaces exclude private amenities. If you've ever waited for the exact moment to drop proof, like this part." That moment felt better than revenge. The officer read it, looked back at Karen. "Ma'am, this doesn't say what you think it says." Her face drained of color. She started to stammer. "He's twisting it!" "No, Karen," I said, voice low. "I'm just reading. If you've ever watched someone realize their fake power just expired, comment expired below." The officer sighed. "Ma'am, you and your guests need to leave the property immediately." Karen tried one last push. "He's lying. Her husband cut her off quietly. Karen, let's just go." The words hit her harder than the powder ever did. She turned to me, eyes blazing. "This isn't over," I smiled. "You're right. It's just getting documented. If you've ever learned that calm is the loudest response, share this story. Someone out there needs that reminder." As they walked away, I turned back toward the officer and said, "For what it's worth, I've got everything on camera." He nodded slowly. "Smart man." But I knew Karen, she wouldn't back down. She'd just start a new war, one fought with paper and signatures instead of words. By Monday morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Emails, notices, thinly disguised threats. Every single one stamped with the HOA logo and, of course, signed by Karen. More violation notices for unapproved fencing, height. Warnings for unsightly trash bins visible from street view. Even one about improper lawn edging. It was like she'd turned revenge into paperwork. If you've ever dealt with someone who weaponizes authority, comment bin there, because Karen was at her most dangerous when she thought she was in control. I didn't react. Instead, I built a folder on my computer. Karen Phase 2. Every email, every timestamp, every call log went in. When you've spent a decade surviving corporate politics, you don't panic, you prepare. By Thursday, a new notice arrived. Show emergency meeting attendance required. I smiled. Perfect. Saturday afternoon, I walked into the community hall. Fluorescent lights, cheap coffee, folding chairs. Karen was at the front, tapping her clipboard like a judge. "Ethan," she said coolly, "we're here to discuss your ongoing violations and hostile behavior." Hostile? I almost laughed. I looked around. A dozen neighbors sat quietly. People I'd mowed lawns beside, helped shovel driveways with, and I could see it in their eyes. They were tired of her, too. I placed my tablet on the table and pressed play. Security footage. Crystal clear. Karen and her family are breaking into my yard. Her guests are jumping in my pool. Her voice on camera saying, "We're all neighbors, who cares?" The room went silent. If that moment gave you chills like this part, because the truth had finally spoken louder than her voice. Karen froze. Her clipboard slipped from her hand. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "Wow." The HOA chair cleared his throat. "Karen, this is a serious breach of conduct." Her face crumpled. She stood there, speechless for the first time. I didn't gloat. I just said quietly, "I think we're done here. If you've ever watched someone choke on their own arrogance, share this story, because that silence was priceless." But Karen wasn't finished. When a person like that loses power, they don't disappear. They mutate. For 3 whole weeks, silence hung over the neighborhood like fog. No emails, no knock on the door. No Karen. And just when I thought peace might actually stick, it hit a thick envelope in my mailbox. No name, no return address. Just a seal from the HOA. Inside, a letter accusing me of harassment, intimidation, and public defamation. Every sentence felt like it was written by someone cornered and desperate. And at the bottom, there it was again, Karen Moore's signature. If you've ever dealt with someone who can't stand losing, comment can't let go because this was her last gasp for power. I could have ignored it. But no, not this time. I wanted it to be public, documented, exposed, so I did something she didn't expect. I forwarded the entire letter with attachments straight to the HOA's legal counsel and the local precinct. Within hours, my phone rang. It was Officer Daniels, the same guy who'd been at the pool that day. He sounded amused. "Mr. Cole, seems your HOA president's at it again. Are you free tomorrow?" "Always," I said. The next morning, Karen showed up at my gate with a camera crew local news, mic in hand, her best fake smile on. She started shouting from the sidewalk, painting herself as the victim. "See? This is the man harassing me. He's dangerous!" I just turned, pointed to my security camera, and said nothing. If you've ever realized silence can be louder than shouting, like this moment, because that's exactly what broke her. The officer pulled up mid-scene. Karen tried to hold her ground, yelling, waving her arms, until he stepped forward and said, "Ma'am, please put your hands where I can see them." Her smile cracked. Her voice trembled. The mic fell. It was over. Neighbors stood on porches, whispering. Phone recording. "Karen's empire is collapsing in 4K. If karma timing ever made you grin, share this story because that day, it hit perfect." But as she was led away, I realized her war wasn't just about control. It was about fear, and fear doesn't vanish easily. 2 days later, she came back, not with reporters, not with her clipboard, just herself standing at the edge of my driveway, wearing sunglasses big enough to hide what was left of her pride. I stepped outside slowly, not saying a word. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind carried that heavy, awkward silence that happens when someone finally realizes they've lost. Karen cleared her throat. "You really think this is over?" I smiled lightly. "I don't think anything, Karen. I know it's over." She laughed once, short, bitter. "You ruined my reputation. You humiliated my family," I shrugged. "You did that yourself. I just hit record." If you've ever had to remind someone that accountability isn't cruelty, like this part because truth doesn't need volume to sting. She stepped closer. "You're going to regret this," her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. And then she slapped me. The sound echoed sharp, fast, final. Neighbors turned. Doors opened. And right behind her, I saw the same police cruiser from before pulling up slowly to the curb. Officer Daniels got out, calm as ever. "Ma'am, we really doing this again?" Karen froze. He looked at me. "You good, Ethan?" I nodded once. Better than ever. She tried to argue, but the officer had already pulled out the cuffs. Her voice cracked into something small desperate as he read her rights for the second time. If you've ever watched Karma run a perfect rerun, comment full circle below because that's exactly how it felt. As the car door shut, I turned toward my house, sunlight spilling over the deck. Same pool, same chair, different piece. For the first time in months, the air felt clean. Quiet wasn't awkward anymore, it was earned. I poured myself a fresh coffee and whispered, "Corporate closure signed, sealed, delivered. If quiet victory feels better than any argument ever could, share this moment." But this story wasn't really about revenge, it was about balance. And balance has one final lesson left to teach. Peace didn't last long, it rarely does. A week later, I got a call from Officer Daniels. He sounded lighter this time, almost amused. "Mr. Cole," he said, "thought you'd want to know, turns out your HOA president's been busy." "Busy?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "Embezzlement. HOA funds, fake maintenance charges, forged invoices, the whole 9 yards. Looks like she's been billing the community for repairs that never happened." I didn't speak right away. I just stared out at my pool, the same one she'd claimed as hers. The water rippled gently under the morning sun. If you've ever felt karma connect every dot without you lifting a finger, like this part, because that silence hit different. Daniels chuckled softly. She'll be facing charges soon. Oh, and guess who reported her first? Her own treasurer, I smiled. Poetic. Later that month, the HOA board held a final meeting this time, without her. They voted to dissolve her presidency and reimburse every homeowner she'd scammed. Her house went up for sale not long after. Empty, quiet, hollow the way arrogance always ends. And then came the twist no one saw coming. The bank listed her property at auction. Low starting bid, great location, and somehow, no one else placed an offer. Yeah, I bought it. If you've ever believed that patience always wins in the long run, comment karma delivered because owning her old house was more than irony. It was closure. Now that the house sits just 2 doors down, renovated, clean, peaceful, I turned it into a short-term rental. People come here to relax, to breathe, to reset. The name? Blue Haven Annex. Simple, peaceful, mine. If turning chaos into calm ever felt like the best revenge, share this story. Someone out there needs to know it's possible. But I wasn't just done with Karen, I was done with everything she stood for. And that last lesson? It wasn't about control. It was about freedom. 6 months later, the neighborhood sounded different. No barking orders from the corner house. No clipped tone in HOA emails. No unwanted footsteps by my pool. Just peace real, earned peace. Most mornings, I sit on the back porch with a mug of coffee, watching the sunrise paint gold across the water. The same pool that once started a war now reflects nothing but calm. And sometimes, when the light hits just right, I almost hear echoes laughter, shouting, splashing ghosts of what used to be chaos. But they fade quickly. Because peace has a sound too, it's called quiet. If you've ever fought for your own peace, like this part because sometimes calm is louder than revenge ever could be. Neighbors wave more now. People smile when they pass by. Even the HOA, now under new leadership, feels human again. They ask for my advice sometimes. Funny how the guy they once accused of non-compliance became their problem solver. Guess that's what happens when you stop chasing control and start protecting peace. The old Karen house, my rental, now stays booked almost every weekend. Families come to rest, not rule. One guest even left a note on the counter that said, "We've never felt so relaxed." I just smiled. If only they knew. If you've ever turned your pain into something that heals others, comment full peace, because that's where every story like this should end. I learned something through all of this. Control isn't power. Peace is. Because when you stop letting chaos rent space in your head, you finally start living in your own home again. So yeah, I sprinkled a little powder once. But what I really spread was perspective. And if you took anything from this story, if you've ever had to fight for your peace, stand your ground, or let go instead of exploding, share this video with someone who needs that reminder. And hey, if you want more real, raw, and cinematic stories like this one, hit subscribe. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud, it's peaceful.